Hello listeners, happy Sunday. This is our regular Sunday morning Q&A podcast, and we've got our first question in, Matt. Over to you.
Right, well, it's from Claire Hill. Thank you, Claire. I have a question that I'm fearful of asking because I absolutely dread your response. Is Starmer still a European? I'm not sure what he believes anymore, to be honest. Matt, what do you reckon?
Well, probably not really right now. I think he's displayed enough clear indications that he's much more interested in winning power and appeasing voices that I think the Labour Party's scared of alienating, the red wall, this fictional kind of sense that there's still this enormous groundswell of people who are pro-Brexit. All the polls tell you that 2/3 of the country would reverse it in a heartbeat if they could. So whether he's irrationally not pushing this European button or whether he just thinks the percentage shot is not to major on it, but I suspect also that he will come to government and have a lot of domestic stuff to deal with, and even though the big answer in my view is a recalibration of our relationship with Europe, that's not where his focus will be, because it's a long-term play and it's not the short-term expedience he's going to need.
I think that's absolutely right, and the defence from Starmer Central is always the same, which is their private polling says there's a kind of a duality in the electorate's approach to this, which is, you're right, they think Brexit has been a disaster. However, in contradiction, they don't want to undo Brexit, which is ridiculous, but that's the nature of politics. So, and the Labour is also correctly aware that one of the things they'll be accused of by the Tories in the campaign is that they are going to undo Brexit. So I get the caution. However, it's not enough. And one of the things that we plainly need, even if you don't say we want to rejoin, is that we need better relations with the EU, simply to generate growth, to become a serious nation again.
Yeah.
And I think Starmer shouldn't be afraid of saying that. No. I mean, that's a sign of strength.
Also, I do think that there's a case for saying that the European Union needs to get its act together a little bit better. Before, the reality is we're out of the European Union right now. And I don't think the European Union would ever take us back until both political parties
there was a bipartisan,
were completely
a distant prospect.
This is nailed on.
Yeah.
So that's a long time in the future. But also, I think the European Union hasn't done enough to look at the reasons behind why Brexit could have happened, the reasons why people like Geert Wilders are getting elected with big votes.
Yeah, and he wants a referendum.
He wants a referendum in Holland. I don't think there's any appetite for it, but that's what he wants. It's on his plate, on his mandate. So Europe is still in a state of flux, I think, and something's got to happen at that level as well, I think, before people like Keir Starmer think it's worth their while saying, crikey, we need to jump back on that shit.
But it does take a while. It took 12 years last time. I hope it doesn't take that long this time. Yeah. But you have to start somewhere.
We do. Thank you, Claire, for that. We started with your question. Here's the next one. From the Conservatives' point of view, this is from Ben Valentine. Thank you for your question, Ben. From the Conservatives' point of view, they have more than halved inflation, cutting taxes in the budget, see dissent and conflict in Labour. You're referring to Gaza, I assume there. Do you think the general election will be sooner rather than later? Matt?
Well, I think that what we've learned, I think Ben's right in his analysis, which is that the achievement of the inflation goal, even though it won't really be felt by people in their pockets, food inflation is still at 10%, for example, has cheered up the Tories. They are pleased as Conservatives about the tax cuts. Let's say no more than that. I think they are pleased also quietly that Labour's having some problems over the Israel-Gaza conflict, although I'm sceptical that is as damaging as they think. But to answer Ben's question, which we actually talked about a little bit in the main podcast this week, I think that the general election that now could be in May It probably won't be in May. It will probably be in October. It can go to January 2025.
Can it? I didn't
Yes,
realise that.
you have to. The last date is in January 2025
Wow,
in terms of
I didn't know
actually holding the election itself.
Okay.
And there's always that part of prime ministers that wants to play it long in case, as Mr. Corbett said, something turns up.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think that Sunak has, he's only been prime minister for a year. He's got past the all important 49-day Liz Truss milestone.
Yeah.
But I think he would like to go a bit longer.
What do you think is in his head and his advisor's head when they're looking at the poll numbers, which are crushingly
dire,
awful for them? Do you think, have they got a number where they think, well, if we can get it to just 10%, 12% difference, or if my personal popularity can edge above Keir Starmer's, do you think there are triggers, or is it more an emotional kind of like, well, let's just
I think that prime ministers in Rishi Sunak's situation operate on two entirely different psychological levels. One is, I have to believe to some extent that I can pull this off, that something disastrous will happen to Labour, that something miraculous will happen to us, the Tories. The other level, which is sort of the reality-based world, is no party's ever come back from this length of bad polls this bad. We're heading for defeat, but I don't want to go down in history as a John Major who led the Tory party to a landslide defeat.
Yeah.
If I do certain things, maybe I can, limit the damage. And I think that is in a lot of Tories' minds, not least because they don't want to lose their seats. I mean, Jeremy Hunt has a very, suddenly a very vulnerable seat. And I think a lot of them, just for job security, would quite like a less bad result.
It is going to be such a popcorn night, isn't it? The night of the general election. It will be the most fascinating general election for a long time.
I think it'll be quite extraordinary. I hope it'll have the sense of something new starting, but I'm very nervous of prediction these days.
Yeah. Okay, well, thank you, Ben, for your question. Next question.
I've rented my entire life. I'm 54 and never felt any government has supported me or the rental market. I have friends in Berlin and look at Germany's model enviously. What can be done to change the British attitude towards renting? That's from John in Sutton Coldfield. John, thanks.
Thank you, John.
What do you reckon, Matt?
Well, I'm 54 as well, and I've never rented. I've been obsessed with. I'm probably the worst person for John to ask this because I'm culturally obsessed with the idea of property ownership, which is, it's one way of doing it.
That's our generation, isn't it?
But it is. I don't know why it should be. Is that a reaction to what do you think? Is that a reaction to?
I think the 80s were a period when you could actually afford and beyond. In the 80s and 90s were a period when you could afford to buy a property on a quite low salary, and in a way you just can't now. I have rented, and I think that the rental market has got so expensive now.
Right.
I'd like to see a lot more regulation of the rental market, actually. But the truth is, what I'd really like to see, which is not quite an answer to John's question, is shed loads of affordable and social housing. I think it is scandalous that we live in a country where, the view from people's second home in the country matters more than the ability of young people to get an affordable house.
That's absolutely right. And there are parts of this country where, nice traditional parts of the country, but that might be challenged jobs-wise. Like I'm thinking about the Lake District, places like this. We're full of second homes where kids of families who've lived there for generation after generation can't afford to buy their own place. London's a big place where you can move around, and there are places you can live on the fringes of London.
Yes.
It's still really expensive. You can find a way. But if you live in a village in the Lake District and there are 50, 60, 80 houses there, and 30 of them are owned by second property owners who've got them on Airbnb, you're screwed. You can't live in the village your family's lived in for generations. You've got to wait for your parents to die. That sucks.
I say build, baby, build.
I think something should be done about. I don't want to be, say. I mean, owning a second house is already punitive in terms of council tax, and you got all of this stuff. But I do think there should be some constructive way of of the local community benefiting from second homes. Maybe maybe there's a kind of local tax from Airbnb that goes back into the community.
And our whole attitude to bricks and mortar is going to have to change because we're going to have to fund our as we live longer, we're going to have to fund our social care out of it. And the old system where which the Tories still, I think, in their bones believe in, which is that you hand over as much as possible, in some cases 100% of your assets to your kids. That world has gone,
right?
And it's another big change that needs to start sort of feeding into the mainstream and isn't yet.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you, John, for that question. Next question. What is the best Christmas song in the Matt's opinion? And that's from Julia.
Oh, well,
I don't know where Julie's from, but thank you, Julia.
Well, it's a very good question. I like the Rat Pack. This is a slight evasion, but there's a wonderful compilation of the Rat Pack singing Christmas classics.
Right.
And that always makes me feel dead festive.
I thought you were talking about bloody Roland Rap for a minute.
Yeah, I'm not going to do George Michael again this week, okay? We did George Michael last week.
For me, and this is
George Michaels,
yeah. This is such a cliched answer, but Christmas does start in my soul when I hear the opening bars of Fairy Tale to New York.
Oh, actually, that's probably the right answer.
Yeah. I think it's so wrapped up in it now.
The boys in the LAPD choir, the NYPD choir were singing Galway Bay, and the bells were ringing out for Christmas Day.
That could have been someone.
Well, so could anyone.
Exactly. So there we go. That's my
Didn't think you were going to get that, did you, listeners?
Thank you, Julia. And our next question from Eleanor in SW3. That's a London postcode. Much like Matt D, I've grown tired of biscuits.
This is a callback to one we had a few weeks ago, isn't it?
Yeah. Biscuits are disappointing and insubstantial, but try as I might, I've not had Matt's luck in ditching them. Could the two Matts offer me some advice? Matt?
So, well, I think this is going to follow us around like lost luggage. Look, I'm going to get a bit Jordan Peterson, Eleanor, and say, toughen up, tidy your room, just stop with the biscuits, okay? Yeah. Turn your back on biscuits.
Break the cord.
Show some spine. However, to show that there's a compassionate side to me too, I think there are 12-step therapy groups, for people who just cannot ditch the biscuits. I mean, I didn't have to go, but I have total respect for people who go for help with their, problems with biscuits.
But it's hard sometimes, isn't it, when you get lured into the world of biscuit.
Yes, I mean, I think biscuitism generally is nothing. It's biscuitism generally is not a disease to laugh about.
No.
And
it's like the opposite of John Lennon's baggism, isn't it?
Yes, it is. I'm actually a bit disappointed that you're laughing, but I mean, it's.
I'm sorry to biscuits.
Listeners. I'm sorry for the editor-in-chief's levity about this serious health issue.
People who suffer from biscuitism.
We do our best, and people, do feel free to email us if you have problems. We're here for you. You're not alone.
No. Don't suffer in silence.
Thank
you very much for all your questions.
Thank you.
And we do this every Sunday morning after our regular show on Fridays. So please email in any questions and any observations you've got about the show to 2Matts, that's the number 2, MATTS, at tnepublishing.com. 2Matts at tnepublishing.com. We love to hear from you, so please do write. Please do write. Thanks as always to our production team led by the third Matt Hill at Rethink Audio. And until next Friday for our regular podcast,
it's goodbye from me.
It's goodbye from him. Goodbye.